First off, I must thank General Muttanna for all the kind words and the research which he's carried out. And after that, I must welcome all of you to this talk which I have put together. So starting with all these luminaries who've been mentioned, Ashok Ji, the principal, the event organizers of the Ajit Knowledge Forum of Sainik School Bijapur, and the alumni of your esteemed school sprinkled all over the globe. It's a school, of course, that boasts of many high-profile personalities and high achievers who have contributed and worked for the betterment of our great nation. To all of you and your families, my respectful pranams. Many of you may have been intrigued by the topic that I have chosen for our interaction today. It stems from the fact that like I would say all of us Indians, am proud of our deep and rich cultural roots and our value systems that I believe are timeless. That was then, way back in the past, before we lost all that had defined us. We have allowed ourselves to be swept away by the glitz, the glamour, and enticements of modern thinking, where it appears that it's always the ends that justify the means that lead to profit, the profit that leads to wealth, and wealth in turn empowers the wealthy to abandon cherished and timeless human values that has been the underlying cause of human conflict on our beautiful planet. I recognize that our responses, when I say our, I mean our country's Indian responses to the fast changing scenarios in the world that we live in today, are conditioned by our centuries old philosophy. And sadly, sticking to that kind of philosophy sets us apart and unfortunately puts us on a collision course with the rest of the world that has become extremely materialistic and exploitative to the extent that it is beginning to threaten the very existence of our species, the human species, on our planet Earth. So, at the outset, before I jump into the meat of the matter, I wish to level with the audience that the topic I have chosen is really a question for which I do not have a definitive answer. How do we reverse this trend? Peering into the future is fraught with danger. Ask any soothsayer, any astrologer. It can be way off the mark, and the reason for that is due to the many interdependencies that singly and collectively, if they are taken collectively, go to make up this complex world that we live in today. As such, what I wish to share with you is my personal opinion of what ought to be and how far are we from realizing that ideal. I'm hoping that this session, in which you will all participate later, will end up being interactive, given the rich experience that the alumni of the Sainik School Bijapur have in running both the government as well as business. As for my views regarding the future trajectory of space exploration, I must warn you that they may strike you all as very utopian, very far out, and somewhat impractical. But it shall be my attempt to nudge you all to at least ponder on whether we need the suggested change to happen, or do we continue to remain trapped in the cycle of human conflict that we have now been prisoners of for centuries? But before I sail into this future I talked about, Ashokji had told me that you, the audience, are more keen to hear about my space flight, about the how and the why of the training regimen, the conduct of the flight itself. As per his wishes, I shall quickly breeze through these topics before I get down to weighty issues that I hope you will be interested in as much as I am. And it's not every day that I have a captive audience. So, and the reason I'm looking forward to this is because it pertains to the important subject of securing the future of our species on our home planet. Essentially, human beings were not meant to fly, but we did. Initially, as part of mythological folklore. And this was till 1903, and that was the first time when Orville Wright piloted the first heavier than aircraft that stayed airborne for all of 12 seconds. And it covered a distance of 100 feet at the breakneck speed of about 11 kilometers per hour. And roughly only 6 decades later, Neil Armstrong was walking on the moon. So that is how fast technology has ramped up. And that speed has increased even further now. So in 1982, the then Soviet Union offered to fly an Indian into space to further cooperation between our two countries in the field of space research. And so 2 test pilots from the Indian Air Force were chosen to undergo training at the Yuri Gagarin Space Flight Training Center at Star City, located about 70 kilometers out of Moscow. I happened to be one of the 2. My senior colleague, Wing Commander Ravish Malhotra, was the other. Humans, as I had pointed out earlier, were not meant to fly. And as such, our bodies function well when we are supported by the life-sustaining environment which is available on our home planet. And that environment, due to the presence of gravity, it is due to the presence of gravity. It is due to the composition of the atmosphere, which is the air we breathe, and finally, the availability of social interaction for the mental wellness of each of us. Spaceflight transports the human body in a very short period of time into an environment that is devoid of gravity, devoid of the atmosphere. Worse, the body now has to survive in an environment which basically consists of a vacuum. And all of us have studied science and physics, and we know that as the atmospheric pressure reduces, it lowers the boiling point. And in a vacuum, it is lowered to a point where the temperature of the human body is enough to cause our bodily fluids to start boiling. And that causes instant death. So systems, therefore, have to be designed to replicate the atmosphere so that humans can function in the near vacuum of space by artificially pressurizing the workspaces while they are in orbit or during transit when above an altitude of 30 kilometers. Similarly, the training that is important to cosmonauts and astronauts so that their bodies can get conditioned to adapt to microgravity is the same reason. Frequent head movements occur due to weightlessness, and these cause nausea and space sickness. Additionally, in our case, the training was a lot more challenging because we had to learn the Russian language. The medium of instruction during training was in that language, and the flight communications, the intercommunication between the crew members as well were in that language. Now, I'm talking about what we experienced some 4 decades ago when I trained there. And I must confess that I'm unaware of the changes that may have taken place in the training regimen since then. But I am guessing that not much may have changed because the human body has not changed fundamentally in the interim period. And the training essentially is designed to train the human body to withstand the rigors of space flight. And nothing has changed in the environment in space either. There is still a vacuum as it was. Now that you have some basic idea of how space flight differs from, say, civil or military aviation, it is time, I think, to return to the topic of this interaction. I shall now attempt to predict not only where space exploration is heading, but also where it ought to be heading in future. So let us begin by evaluating the future of our home planet Earth first. The prognosis is not good. There is hunger, there is pollution, unemployment, climate change. The world has witnessed social unrest in the past in Hong Kong, in Paris, Indonesia, Beijing, Egypt, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and closer home in Afghanistan, Myanmar, and now Ukraine, a country which is presently dealing with a military war, but shortly will have to contend with a civil unrest when shortages become endemic. At the same time, we are moving towards a waterless world as we face a serious energy deficit. The Earth, I'm afraid, is terminally ill, and it suffers from a severe case of non-sustainable development. Its finite, non-renewable resources are being frittered away at a very alarming rate. And Earth is the only place capable of nurturing human life. And this I say at least till as far as the human eye, or shall I say that eye in the sky, the Hubble or the James Webb telescopes can see. So when we go to the history books and start turning the pages back, we see that the conflicts that have taken place around the world till now had taken place due to the inequitable distribution of wealth. Wealth that was created by a few who had controlled the finite resources that were available and were God-given where they lived. And now this wealth was generated when these resources got monetized, more often than not, by powerful nations who raided and dispossessed the weak. And in each case, weak nations did not possess the wherewithal to protect themselves. And so they had to part with their resources that made the occupying forces rich, and the rich thereafter became powerful enough to forge an inequitable world order. I repeat again, the world order they forged was inequitable, and it was an exploitative world order. We are now living that life. To put it differently, we are living in a global society that follows an exclusive rather than an inclusive model. A model where the rich keep getting richer while the poor get more and more vulnerable. And that really is the causative factor of strife, conflict, unsustainable growth, quarter on quarter profit, and ultimately social unrest. Our energy consumption rate is going up exponentially. It does not take a rocket scientist to see that we need to find alternative energy sources either here on Earth or trawl for it in outer space. In fact, the current state of Earth has catalyzed efforts to first explore, then inhabit, and inevitably thereafter exploit in the near future, first the moon and later perhaps Mars. Now, this effort has become crucial actually to the survival of the human race on planet Earth. The driving force for space exploration today is more survival and less science, but not everybody is going to tell you that. And also, please don't be surprised, and this is what will happen on the moon after we inhabit it. We will carve out national boundaries there, as we have done in Antarctica. Exactly what we have done in Antarctica. If you continue to follow the exclusive model of growth. What next? Space exploration has never been cheap. It has become even more expensive now. Government funding has started drying up. There are other more pressing and more politically expedient allocations that need to be made by the governments of the day, wherever they may be. After all, these governments need to be re-elected, don't they? So today, as the frequency of launches need to increase and technological challenges spurred by our consumptive lifestyle need to be addressed, some changes to the funding models have become necessary. Enter the private sector. It's made an entry, and this sector has been playing an increasingly important role. Now, before long, I believe that exploration will become the sole preserve of sovereign nations, but exploitation of space resources for profit will shift to the private sector. Given this background, we can expect that going forward, all investments by the private sector will be measured against the return on investment yardstick. What does that mean? More the investment, more the activity in space, more the R&D, more the innovation. Materials will be produced for use back on Earth, more the profits, and more the protectionism in terms of these new markets that are so created. And the more the conflicts arising out of these monopolistic activities, sanctions, technology denials, in short, business as usual, to feed the engine that runs the infamous exclusive model of growth on our home planet. Except that space exploration is a niche activity, and only niche players will derive benefit from this activity. So resources will be farmed in space. They'll be transported back to Earth for the exclusive use of only the citizens of those countries that had put up the capital for this type of exploitation. The engine of the exclusive model will continue to throb. I think we need to focus on the immediate impact and the future trajectory of human activity in space, specifically on what the further effects of human activity will be in the long term. When the moon is first explored and subsequently exploited as a result of the renewed interest being shown by current spacefaring nations. As far as I'm concerned, the writing on the wall is clear now. No single nation individually can afford to master and pay for all the technologies required to create a human settlement on the moon, or then later explore Mars before settling there to plunder its resources. Once again, it is cooperation rather than competition which recommends itself. And there's another angle to this. If each aspiring spacefaring nation decides that we would like to develop an independent capability to master these technologies only for ourselves, we will only have succeeded in speeding up the already scarce, we would have speeded up the expenditure in the already scarce Earth's limited non-renewable resources. And we would have done so by manyfold. So it makes better sense to collaborate. It makes better sense to leverage the space technology strengths as existing of different nations today, because this approach will result in a cost-effective buildup of capabilities wherever they may exist, and then they can be utilized in a collaborative framework to colonize the moon by people from Earth. It will then become a truly cooperative and collaborative venture by the people, for the people of our beautiful planet. And now, let me go in for some risky crystal ball gazing. Today, the world just appears to be safer than it used to be if one considers merely the frequency with which wars now take place. The reduced frequency is only because wars are bad for business. Well, at least for businesses other than the business of aerospace and defense. I understand that this is a wrong time to make the statement, with Ukraine being systematically converted into a wasteland. But then again, it also becomes the right time to make the statement in the context of the exclusive model of our existence, which exists today, where wars are being manufactured to support the hugely remunerative military-industrial combine. General Dwight Eisenhower had said in his time, "I hate war as only a soldier who has lived it can." And don't we all know that, us soldiers at least? I hate war as only a soldier who has lived it can, only as one who has seen its brutality, its futility, its stupidity. Nice words, but later, as the President of the United States, he ended up architecting the military-industrial combine. So today, as we ready to return to the moon and beyond, the world waits. It waits, watching. Will there be a change in our approach, or whether we will choose status quo and, as before, continue to follow the exclusive model of wealth creation and subsequent non-sharing of that wealth, as we have been doing up until now. And if we continue to stick to this path, I believe we will continue to remain prisoners of our violent past. Environmentally speaking, we will continue to expend resources far in excess to what is available. Soon, Earth can become incapable of supporting human life here. And this brings me to the central point I wish to make this evening. If we continue to do what we have been doing up until now, then instead of learning from history, we will have chosen to refuse to learn from it. Commencement of this new chapter in space exploration presents us with a golden opportunity to script a new future, a future that is fundamentally different to the past we have been surviving in up till now. There is now a renewed interest in space exploration, yes. This is the first time that humans shall be leaving Earth's orbit. This is the first time our civilization is ready to leave its cradle, so to speak. And this time it is leaving it with the stated intention of not exploration, but of colonizing another planet and then exploiting its potential for use back on Earth. When we leave and set up base there and later on Mars, should we be going there as we have been doing up, say, until now, as Russians, Americans, Europeans, Chinese, and tomorrow as Indians after the Gaganyaan project takes off? Or should we be going out there and later, perhaps millions of kilometers further away, as humans from planet Earth? Should we continue at that time to cling to our national identities as we prepare to travel to Mars and beyond? If we concentrate on achieving merely a narrow national objectives in space exploration without addressing the core strife-causing issues, and by that I mean the inequitable distribution of finite resources and therefore wealth, we shall merely be replicating our dysfunctional earthly societal model on celestial colonies which we shall be establishing in future. We shall succeed only, I think, in exporting the seeds of earthly conflict to outer space. Again, what do we do once we have colonized the moon? It does not make sense to default into the same exclusive wealth distribution model. If we go to the moon and later to Mars and beyond as people from Earth, we must share the resources we farm there with everybody back on Earth. If we do that, we will begin turning back the blood-stained pages of history, page by page, bit by bit. It'll take a while, but the process will start. Now, I'm not naive. I don't expect any of you in the audience to be naive either. This will be politically challenging. It'll be challenging to get this model to work. It'll also be challenging, more so, I would say, for the private sector. How will they answer their shareholders if they agree to part with profits accruing out of space-related business activity for the benefit of underdeveloped and developing nations? I believe that this is a step that needs the attention of business leaders, philanthropists, bureaucrats, the influential group that advises our politicians. Actually, mere politicians will not do to forge a new world order. We need visionary statesmen who will be supporting future space activities. And I'm sure that many sitting in the audience, the next generation, will supply those kind of statesmen. Setting aside, for example, a percentage of profits or a percentage of GDP, quite like it is done with CSR budgets, would be one way to give back to society and invest in our collective conflict-free future. There is need to forge a global consensus on this issue. So what should be India's role in reorienting the worldview of nations as is being suggested? This is not going to happen overnight. Existing government policy is not going to be trashed in a hurry because of the presence of pressure groups that will want to pursue profit as before. You know, the gravy train needs to keep rolling. But change, however, must begin to happen. We would be well advised to start with baby steps. From nations, it will require leadership of a very high order to forge such a consensus. I believe that India can play that role. From its inception, India has been running a unique space program. It is the only space program which has had a prime socio-economic focus. ISRO has amply demonstrated how technology can be harnessed for altering the trajectory of people's lives by making available relevant information that helps our economy. And that, in turn, positively impacts the lives of our citizens across the board, not only the rich and famous, but of common man. How does it do that? Through infotainment, telemedicine, teleeducation, disaster management, earth resources data, which then is used for better management of our subterraneous resources, of agriculture, and that in turn bolsters the national economy. So ISRO needs to stay the course and lead by example. What ISRO has done for India, India can do for our neighboring region by sharing its expertise and economy building data, thus supporting our neighbors by enabling them to become beneficiaries of an inclusive model of sustainable growth instead of the current global exclusive model. Apart from it becoming a significant diplomatic outreach, it will provide the rest of the world a living proof of concept that such an approach can result in a peace dividend in our conflict-driven region first, and later, hopefully, the ripple effect in the rest of the world. India can wage peace in the region instead of being caught up in the manipulative power play orchestrated by nations that create conflicts to sustain the military-industrial combine for business. India, I wish to remind, though I don't need to remind, also has a centuries-old philosophical tradition that is found in our ancient text, the Upanishad. It records the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one family. This is who we were. Today, India's expertise in space sciences is grudgingly being recognized the world over. This gives us an opportunity to influence global policy in a direction that space exploration needs to take in the future. Taken together, these 2 points will give India the moral and the technological clout to influence international space exploration policy. We all work and live to make this world a better and a safer place for our children. Personally, I'm of the belief that science must be leveraged to provide life-altering solutions that can positively impact the lifestyles and well-being of all who live on planet Earth. And this can only be achieved if some checks and controls are put in place so that human activity in space can be regulated, resulting in sustainable exploitation. If science has to be done, it is time that it is done with a conscience, and the end use must be inclusive and not exclusive. Now, the model, which involves the sharing of discovered resources back on Earth as a result of future space exploration, is a seemingly impossible concept. It is a thought that needs to be worked on to make it economically viable and politically acceptable. If we can work out the former, make it economically viable, the latter, of it becoming politically acceptable, will surely be possible. Details can be worked out by government reps and business leaders, but only then will we be able to work towards ensuring what Professor Yashpal had once expressed, the hope that our common origin should get for us a common destiny. I'm suggesting that India, that is ISRO, works towards an inclusive and sustainable development on Earth by influencing nations to set up a joint expeditionary task force to farm resources in outer space and share the same with other nations back on Earth for the greater good of humankind, so to speak. This is not an implausible dream. In 1997, a UN resolution was signed by 97 countries, and it stated that the exploration of outer space shall be carried out for the benefit of all member states, and that space shall be the province of all humankind. ISRO can exercise its influence and heft and shape global space exploration policy along the sentiments expressed in that resolution of the United Nations. I am suggesting that we work towards building heaven on earth instead of creating another far-off hell on the moon and beyond, by continuing to follow the same societal model as we have on earth today. This, ladies, gentlemen, cadets, this is our challenge today, but it is also our opportunity, the opportunity to become who we can be as we step up our space activities in future. I admit I may have come across as a dreamer, but as John Lennon once sang, I'm not the only one. If there are enough of us, we can and we must work towards a safer, peaceful coexistence for generations that will follow us on this, our planet Earth, the only true home we shall ever have.